Hey friends, it's Leah with your Winning Wednesday, WINSDAY, coming to you on a beautiful Wednesday. I hope everyone's having a wonderfully winning day and a fabulously winning week. Today, we're going to get right into our lesson as we talk about wisdom at the well. We're going to consider our thoughts. What are we thinking about? It's so important for us to think about what we think about every day. We need to consider our thoughts, and let's look at that from a biblical perspective. So we're going to be looking at some specific scriptures today. Proverbs 23, verse 7, 2 Corinthians 10, verses 4 and 5, and Matthew 15. And it's a little passage out of Matthew, and we won't read the whole thing, but we'll talk about it. So let's just begin with Proverbs 23, 7. It says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." It's pretty straightforward. The way you think is what you become. That's really what this is, what we get from this. And of course, that's taken out of a context of talking about someone who is seated at a table and they're being deceptive. And so it comes from that. So this person is being deceptive because they're deceptive in their heart. So the things that he thinks about are the things that he is doing. And so as a person thinks in their heart, that is what that person will become. So why is our thought life so important? Let's talk about it. Our thoughts drive our words, our thoughts drive our actions, and all of our words and our actions create the atmosphere around us. Have you ever been around someone who they carried a negative atmosphere around them because of the things that they talked about all the time? That's what this is talking about, because it is a spiritual condition. Your thoughts come from within. And so our thoughts drive everything else. What we think about is what drives what we say, and so what drives what we do. So we create our atmosphere with our words and our actions, don't we? I mean, people like to be around us, or they don't like to be around us because we're positive, or they don't like to be around us because we're negative and critical and finding fault and all that kind of stuff. So all of those things work together. Your thoughts drive your actions and drive your words. So what we think about is what determines our direction in life every single day. So what you get up thinking about, that's what's going to drive your day. So if you get up belly aching and complaining and whining and all of that, that's how your day is going to go. I mean, that's just the truth of it. The Bible is very clear about that. Our thoughts drive the direction of our days. So we need to think about what we think about. In Matthew 15, we read that the Pharisees let's just say they were getting onto Jesus about his disciples, because they didn't like the fact that they didn't ceremonially wash their hands before they broke bread. So they didn't go through all the rigmarole in getting prepared to break bread together and all of that. They went from place to place, and then they would just grab their food and they would eat it. And they didn't go through all the ceremonial stuff. And that really bothered the Pharisees. And so they were kind of reprimanding Jesus about that. But Jesus told them in his response that it is not what goes into a person that defiles a person, but what comes out of a person that defiles a person. And then he gets very specific about the digestion of what we take into our bodies and where the waste of that goes. He was very specific with them. Don't you understand that that's what happens? And he said, I'm telling you that it's not what goes into you, it's what comes out of you. That's what defiles you. So he was referring to what is within our spirits. And that's what he was speaking back to the Pharisees. He said, let me reprimand you. Let me tell you what it's really all about. It's about what's in your spirit and what comes out of your mouth. That's what he was talking about. So in verses 18 through 20, we read that Jesus said to them, those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things that defile a person. These are the things that defile a man. So it's not what you're eating, it's what you're feeding your spirit on. That's what defiles you. So when we feed upon the word of God, then what comes out of us will be words and actions that create a right atmosphere around us. So if you think of it like iron, I love this example. Think about it like iron. Iron is the only metal that rusts. So what is rust? What does that really mean? It's when the atmospheric elements cause iron to oxidize. And so this oxidation causes rust. And the rust brings on erosion to the metal. So the elements touch the metal, it oxidizes, and then it begins to erode. And so a cast iron skillet is the first thing that I thought of because I use cast iron skillets that I cook with, and some of them actually belonged to my grandmother. Now let me explain how important this is because my grandmother was born in 1902. And I still have some of the iron skillets that she used in the 1950s. So, and I don't know how much before that, probably before that, but I have some very old cast iron skillets that she had, and they still cook beautifully. And the reason is because of how we take care of them. See, with a cast iron skillet, seasoning is imperative. You season it with oil, and it coats the iron so that the elements don't hurt it and cause that oxidation and that erosion and rust. So if you don't season it, it will definitely rust because I've had some cast iron skillets that got some rust on them and I had to rub it out and then re-season it and get it ready again. It's the original Teflon. I mean, that's just the truth of it. So let's look at it from another way, from a perspective that someone else might think of, and that is a vehicle. A vehicle made of iron will rust, but if you catch that rust before it begins to erode the metal away, then you can sand it out and smooth it out and treat that so that it doesn't rust out. So my husband likes to mess with old cars and hot rods and that kind of thing. And so we've bought some old cars for parts, and so parts of that were rusted out. So there were holes in it, so there was no way to fix it. You had to completely replace that piece. But the pieces that just had a little, just the outside had begun to oxidize, then you can just sand that out and clean it up and treat it and prime it and all of that so that it doesn't rust. So it's important to keep that metal in the right way. So our thought life is much the same way when we think about iron, because we have to season our thoughts with the Word of God. It's so important for us to do that. If we don't, our thoughts will become rusty and begin to erode. And that's the truth. If you don't stay in the Word, if you don't attend church regularly and hang out with your Christian friends regularly, what happens? Your thought life begins to erode, which then begins to erode your word life and your action life. Doesn't it? It affects everything in your life when you don't stay where you need to stay. So we have to keep our thoughts under the authority of Christ. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 and 5 say this: "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ." So this is telling us that our spiritual weapons are the seasoning for our thoughts, and strongholds are the rust that brings the erosion of our thoughts. Okay? If we don't season our thoughts with the Word of God, our thoughts will become rusty and erosive. And they will, and our whole life is going to follow in that rusty erosion. That's what's going to happen. Philippians 4:8 tells us then and teaches us how to season our thought life by focusing our thoughts, fixing our thoughts, some versions say, on things that are true, things that are noble, things that are just, things that are pure, things that are lovely and of good report. If there is any virtue or if there is anything praiseworthy, we need to meditate, think on, fix our thoughts on these things. So the things that are true and noble and just and pure, lovely, of good report, so that are of good reputation. In other words, anything that's good to talk about, anything that is upright to talk about, anything that's true, anything that's pure, anything that's beautiful, anything that is just, righteous is what that means. Anything like that, anything that's lovely, anything that's good to talk about, that's what you need to fix your mind on. And what does that really mean? We need to fix our minds on Christ. We need to fix our minds on the goodness of God and on His mercy and His grace and all of the wonderful things that He does. When we fix our minds on these things, then it's going to help us to be seasoned in the Word, and we're going to have a good thought life. And so our words and our actions are going to follow that. When we season our thoughts with the Word of God and focus our thoughts on the right and righteous things, we will create an atmosphere of peace and tranquility, not only for ourselves, but for the other people around us, because they are also going to feel that peace on us. And they're going to say, I don't know what you've got, but I want it because I want a peaceful life like that. I want to have joy. I want to have peace. I want to have self-control. I want to be able to think on things that are pure and lovely and just and right. I want to think about noble things and not have my mind on all of these other things. So what we think about really does matter. This is a very important lesson for all of us. And I hope that you'll read these scriptures for yourself and that you will think on these things. So I hope that you will make plans to join us for our Wednesday night services. We have things for our children and our youth at 6 o'clock. We also have a women's Bible study at 6 o'clock. All of those happen at 1000 Emerald Street there in Wellington. And we would love for you to join us there for that. And then, of course, on Sunday, we'd love to have you join us for Sunday school at 10 o'clock and for our regular worship service at 11 o'clock. And again, our address is 1000 Emerald Street in Wellington. And if you are not in the Wellington area, we would love for you to join us online right here on this Facebook page. So we would love for you to join us. As I said, you can join us in person. We'd love to meet you in person. We'd love for you, if you've been to our church before, we'd love for you to come back. 1000 Emerald Street in Wellington, Texas. And if you are not in the Wellington area, join us online for our live worship service at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. So until then, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next time. Have a wonderfully winning day and a fabulously winning week. See you then.